Hey, my name is Chris Brennan, and this is your horoscope for Sagittarius rising for the entire year ahead of 2021. So let's go ahead and jump into it. These horoscopes can be read from your sun sign if your sun is in Sagittarius, or your moon sign if your moon is in Sagittarius. But your rising sign or ascendant sign is preferred since that's going to be more personal to you based on your actual birth chart and time of birth. So let's take a look at the planetary movements calendar, which shows where the planets will start at the beginning of the year and how far through the signs of the zodiac they'll get by the end of the year. Some of the main points that I wanted to talk about, the first one is the recent great conjunction of Saturn-Jupiter occurred in your third house of communication, siblings, short distance travel, and education. So on the one hand, this is the beginning of a 3-year transit of Saturn through that sign, through the sign of Aquarius and through your third house. And Saturn can be more of a constrictive energy that can have to do with obstacles and sometimes setbacks or difficulties when it comes to the sphere of communication. If you have siblings, it can be about your relationship with your siblings and some tensions there that may have to be worked out. But ultimately, for many of you, especially those of you with day charts, these will be constructive obstacles that once you encounter them, you'll eventually be able to overcome them and come out of it stronger and having improved communications as a result. So you should have gotten a little bit of a preview of what this transit will be about last year when Saturn dipped into Aquarius from the beginning of April until the beginning of July. It just moved into the first degree or two of Aquarius and then retrograded back out into Capricorn. But that should have given you a little bit of a preview of what this third house transit is going to be all about for the course of the next 2 to 3 years that Saturn will be moving through that sign. So that's a little bit more challenging, but potentially constructive. The good news is that the first year of that transit, Saturn is going to be accompanied by Jupiter, which also moved into Aquarius in December of 2020, and will stay there all the way until December of 2021. So Jupiter is more about growth and expansion and optimism. So there's going to be an expansion in this area of your life in addition to some of the consolidating or constrictive significations of Saturn. So this could be about learning how to communicate what you know, learning how to communicate more effectively, and potentially getting some benefits as a result of communication in the process. There may also be some benefits as a result of travel, and travel being a source of, or at least moving around locally being a source of benefit for you at different points in this year, and also other benefits from third house people, which would include siblings, but also sometimes extended family and relatives, and also potentially friends. So those are areas of your life where you'll have some growth and try to find balance and equilibrium between growth versus consolidation of what you have. And in some instances, you'll have to decide some things to remove from your life and some things to add or keep in your life that are working in your favor. So that'll be one of your main challenges this year. So one of the good things right at the top of the year is that with Saturn moving into Aquarius, that ends a long 3-year transit of Saturn moving through your second house of finances that started in December of 2017. So that was probably a period in which financial matters were a little bit more difficult for you. You may have encountered some major obstacles and setbacks when it comes to money or personal possessions. Last year might have been a little bit better since there would have been a mixture of Jupiter and Saturn transits. So while there may have been some consolidation and some hard lessons in 2020, there may have also been some opportunities for growth with Jupiter moving through your second house at the same time. So Jupiter has also moved on. But I think this is going to take a lot of the focus away from second house matters for most of this year, and less financial focus than previous years of your life, especially over the course of the past 2 or 3 years. So that's good news. Mars has also moved out of your fifth house where it had a long retrograde transit in the second half of 2020. The fifth house is the house that pertains to children, sex and sexuality, and creative expression. And there could have been some tensions or some conflict in that area in the second half of 2020. But the good news is that with Mars moving into Taurus on January 6th, it's completely ending that very long, somewhat arduous 6-month transit through Aries and through your 5th house. So that's good news. All right, other things I wanted to touch on. Uranus is moving through your 6th house in Taurus, which is the house of health and work. And it's going to be squaring Saturn in your 3rd house of communication, off and on over the course of the entirety of 2021, with 3 exact squares between Saturn and Uranus. So somehow it's tying together your 3rd house of communication, siblings, short distance travel, and other topics with your 6th house of work and health. And it may be indicating some tensions that come up during the course of 2021 that are somehow interlinking those 2 areas of your life. So the first exact square between Saturn and Uranus occurs on February 17th or mid-February between 7 degrees of Aquarius and 7 Taurus. The next square occurs June 14th from 13 Aquarius to 13 Taurus. And then finally, the 3rd exact square occurs on December 24th between 11 Aquarius and 11 Taurus. So any of you that have personal planets in your birth chart between 7 and 13 degrees approximately of the fixed signs, that Saturn-Uranus square is going to be much more important for you because you'll be getting simultaneous transits of Saturn and Uranus to those personal points during the course of this year. So Saturn tends to be about restrictions, and Uranus tends to be about liberation and about getting rid of areas where you're under control, or sometimes sudden upsets or sudden disruptions. So in this context, we're talking about in the context of your health or in the context of your work life. So that Uranus transit through Taurus and through your 6th house has been going on for a couple of years now, off and on, since May of 2018 and May of 2019. And it's something that still has, I think, approximately 5 more years to go. So it's going to be ongoing for quite a while. But this year, you should pay attention to the overlap between the topics of your 3rd and 6th houses as points of tension during the course of 2021. This is going to be emphasized and kind of exacerbated, especially when transiting Mars goes through the 3 fixed signs this year of Taurus, Leo, and Scorpio, where it's going to form exact hard aspects with Saturn and Uranus. And that may act as a sort of trigger where there's a sudden intensification of pressure in those areas of your life at that time. So for example, in mid-January, Mars squares Saturn on January 13th, and then it conjoins Uranus on January 20th. Then again, later in the year on July 1st and 3rd, Mars opposes Saturn and then squares Uranus. Then finally in mid-November, Mars squares Saturn and then opposes Uranus November 10th and November 17th. So those are kind of like pressure points this year where if there are tensions in those areas of your life, I'd expect that would be when things sort of come to a head so that it forces you to address it and kind of open a pressure release valve in order to remove some of the pressure from that area of your life before things kind of explode or become much more serious or sort of out of control in some way. So those are some of the tense parts of the year with the Mars transits hitting the Saturn-Uranus. Other things that I wanted to talk about that are especially important and are perhaps more important for you than many of the other rising signs are the eclipses that are going to take place this year in Sagittarius and Gemini especially, which is your 1st house of self and your 7th house of relationships. So the first eclipse set, they always come in pairs, is going to take place in the 2nd quarter of 2021, starting first with a total lunar eclipse in Sagittarius on May 26th in your 1st house of mind, body, self, and appearance. So that should be a culmination of events because it's a lunar eclipse that had started 6 months earlier in December of 2020 when there was a solar eclipse that took place in the same sign of Sagittarius. Then a couple weeks later, there's going to be a solar eclipse in the sign of Gemini in the house of relationships, partnership, marriage, and other people in your life on June 10th. So this is a continuation of a series of eclipses that really started around June of 2020, but definitely picked up in late 2020, starting in late November when there was an eclipse in Gemini in your 7th house, a lunar eclipse, and then on December 14th, when there's a solar eclipse in Sagittarius in your first house of self. So the eclipse series in 2021 is just a continuation of some of these themes of my keywords for eclipses are major beginnings and major endings when it comes to the topics of self and relationships in your life, and especially the things that you do in order to balance those two areas in terms of balancing what you need to do to maintain your own self and your mental and physical vitality, versus what you need to do in order to maintain your relationships and to maintain the sort of give and take between those two areas of your life. That's going to be one of your major lessons this year that you're going to be going back and forth between and trying to maintain, perhaps having to put more energy into one area or the other at different points, depending on where the eclipses are falling at different times in the year. But major beginnings and some major changes in those two areas of your life is one of the most distinguishing factors of 2021. So that's the first eclipse series. Then there's a second eclipse series that occurs later in the year in November and December, where on December 4th, we get the final solar eclipse, which is going to occur in Sagittarius, which will be the final one of that series in your first house of self. But then in November, there's an interesting thing where the eclipses shift into another set of signs, and we get a lunar eclipse, which occurs in Taurus on November 19th. So that's in your sixth house of work and health. And so this is the beginning of a series of eclipses that's really going to take place mainly in 2022, but it's kind of a preview of some of the themes that are to come when the eclipses start happening in Taurus and Scorpio over the course of the next couple of years. And we get the very first one of that eclipse series here in November of 2021 in your sixth house. So because it's a lunar eclipse, I would expect it to indicate a culmination of events or shining a sort of spotlight suddenly, where much more of your focus will suddenly become on sixth house matters pertaining to either your health and maintaining health and what it takes to maintain good health, or alternatively towards your work and what you have to do for work in order to get by and survive and support yourself materially and financially. So I don't know that that's necessarily going to all happen at once, but instead it's opening sort of a window that's going to become more significant as we move forward into 2022. But when you look back on it years later, you may find that some of the themes that then played out over the next couple of years really began in November of 2021 with this first lunar eclipse in Taurus. So pay attention to it. All right, there was only one other major thing that I wanted to touch on for your horoscope for 2021, and that is Jupiter's ingress into Pisces in late December of 2021, which is into your fourth house of your home, your living situation, your parents, and your private life. So Jupiter, of course, is the planet of growth and expansion and optimism, and this could indicate some new developments and new growth and developments with respect to your home and living situation, or with respect to something happening in the life of your family and your private life, opposite to the 10th house, which is your public life and your work and your career. So that can be a good period for all of those things. It doesn't begin until very late December of 2021 when Jupiter moves into Pisces on the 28th. So normally it's not something that I would include in a forecast for 2021 because it's mainly a transit that's going to take place over the course of 12 months in 2022. However, the reason I'm mentioning it is because starting in May, there's going to be this preview period where Jupiter it zooms through Aquarius in the first few months of the year, and then it just barely dips into Pisces starting on the 13th of May. So it actually goes into your fourth house for a couple of months and begins a 2-month preview period of what that transit into your fourth house is going to be like for the entirety of 2022. So pay attention to that. Jupiter goes into Pisces starting on May 13th. Then it stations retrograde on the solstice on the 20th of June, and then it retrogrades out of Pisces and moves back into Aquarius by the 28th of July. We can see it there moving back into Aquarius, and then it moves back into your third house of communication where it has unfinished business that it needs to finish up during the course of the second half of 2021. But I want you to pay attention to that brief little 2-month dip into Pisces because it's going to indicate themes that are going to become much more prominent and much more significant and positive as your ruling planet moves into your fourth house for the entirety of next year. So it should be some good developments with respect to home and living situation, family, and private life. All right, I think those are the main things that I wanted to mention with respect to your horoscope, this sort of broad bird's eye view of the year ahead forecast for 2021. So thanks a lot for watching. Good luck this year, and I'll see you again next year in 2022 for your forecast for the year ahead, probably next December. So good luck and see you then. Many of the images and calendars that were used in this episode are now available as posters on the astrologypodcast.com website. This includes our 2021 Planetary Alignments calendar, which shows all of the ingresses and retrogrades and lunations this year, the Planetary Movements calendar, which shows how far through the signs of the zodiac each of the planets will get during the course of 2021, and also other posters that we have, like our significations of the 12 houses poster, so that you can personalize and understand how each of these transits relates to your own birth chart. We also recently released our 2021 Auspicious Elections Full Year Ahead Electional Astrology Report, where Lisa Scheim and I went through each of the next 12 months and we picked out one lucky date, which would be good for launching new ventures and undertakings using the principles of electional astrology. So you can find out more about that report at chrisbrennanastrologer.com. Thanks to all the patrons that supported the production of this episode of the podcast through our page on Patreon. In particular, thanks to the patrons on our producers tier, including Nate Craddock, Marin Altman, Thomas Miller, Catherine Conroy, Michelle Marilot, Christy Moe, Ariana Amor, Mandy Ray, Angelique Nambo, Sumo Kopic, and Nadia Habhab. For more information about how to become a patron or have your name listed in the credits, please visit patreon.com/astrologypodcast. Also, special thanks to our sponsors, including the Northwest Astrological Conference, which is happening online May 27th through the 31st, 2021. Find out more information at norwac.net. The Mountain Astrologer magazine, which you can find out more information about at mountainastrologer.com. The ISAR Astrology Conference, happening August 18th through the 22nd, 2021. More information at isar2020.org. The Honeycomb Collective Personal Astrological Almanacs, which you can find out more information about at honeycomb.co. Also, the Portland School of Astrology, more information at portlandastrology.org. The AstroGold Astrology app, available for both iPhone and Android, available at astrogold.io. And finally, the primary software program that we use on episodes of the Astrology Podcast is called Solar Fire Astrology Software, which is available at alabe.com, and you can get a 15% discount with the promo code AP15.